Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I would like to provide clarity around the application and licensing processes for anyone who wishes to carry out quarrying. I am joined by the Director of the Department of Planning, Ms. Victoria Pereira, and Dr. Jeff Smith, who is the Environmental Engineer from the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. And I thank them both for being here today with me. Following Hurricane Umberto, a number of roofs, as we well know, were damaged, and Slate is required to complete the necessary repairs to those roofs. As a result, quarrying operators experienced what can be described as a serious increase in the demand for such materials to repair roofs throughout the island. The Department of Planning and Environment and Natural Resources, under my ministry, has been collaborating to ensure that demand for slate is properly satisfied and serviced. But I'd also like to thank the Construction Association, who initially gave us a lot of help and support with dealing with the issue in the initial weeks after Umberto as well. I would like now, as a part of my statement, to differentiate between the roles of the two departments and how they give assistance to the public with these matters. The Department of Planning is responsible for all planning applications submitted for quarrying, planning permission, and subsequent building permits, all of which are currently being expedited and granted for sites that qualify under the policies of the draft Bermuda Plan 2018. And full details of that you can find online at planning.gov.bm. The Department of Environment and Natural Resources is responsible for operating licenses applications for slate cutting facilities, as these are under the controlled plant under the Clean Air Act 1991. These licenses also have conditions that aim to minimize nuisance and noise and any things that might aggravate immediate neighbors to enter these sites. To be clear, anyone who wishes to quarry must do a few things. They must first contact the Department of Planning to take advice on making the appropriate submissions for the proper application. They must also contact the Department of Environment and Natural Resources to apply for an operating license, and may do this via email, via pollutionscontrol@gov.bm, or they can visit the department at the Botanical Gardens in Paget. I would like to note that the Department of Planning is right now in the process of developing a new initiative which involves offering an incentive to those who choose to quarry at the site prior to the development. And just to give an example of what we mean by this, instead of just excavating out the site with a backhoe, essentially, to create space for a water tank or other types of parts of the development, the option to quarry out the site we wish to make available to create the tank that may be a part of that development. While development of this proper process of incentive is ongoing and we're working on all the details, we expect that it will include some sort of rebate on the fees or other savings that a proposed developer can add to the development process. So we're looking to make it some sort of savings for anybody who wishes to choose to quarry out the area rather than just dig it out via machinery. All dependent on, of course, whether the stone is of quality for slate and where the particular site is and how it's zoned. Those are issues that will actually need to be reviewed with any such application, even as we consider the incentives for them to take advantage of. But I also wish to emphasize a number of key points which may have been missed by members of the public around the issue of quarrying, and let you know what the government does not do. The government does not sell slate. Certainly and when I refer to the government, I mean the Department of Planning. We do not determine how much quarry operators cut on a daily basis, and we do not determine when they cut the slate. So there may be sites that have been approved for cutting, but there's no cutting going on. We can't force a quarry operator to cut. And we must also remind everyone that the quarrying of slate is a private business matter. Most of the sites where quarrying either has been going on for a number of years or is current going on is on private property, not on government property. There are 2 sites which are operating, one of which is on government property, and that is at the Prison Farm in St. George. And the other site is located on private property at Radnor Estate Road in Hamilton Parish. Additionally, the Department of Planning has been for a number of weeks, and it continues to this day, conversations with individuals seeking to carry out slate quarrying on at least 4 different sites. But let me make it clear to you all, we are awaiting those persons who have expressed their interest with submitting the appropriate information so that we can expedite their applications. And we have no desire to hold up this process, but there is a process, and they know what they need to do so that we can facilitate their operation of their selected sites for quarrying. Finally, I think we need to have a conversation with the Bermuda public, and I'm challenging the public to consider these issues. And we need, as a country, to think about the long-term viability of large-scale quarrying, period. As a community, we need to move away from strictly relying on quarried slate, stone, and we need to look at other sustainable options. Now, one might say quarrying slate on Bermuda, on like Bermuda land is sustainable, but there are other issues which I think we have to consider, which has to how much land are we prepared to put to quarrying in the future, as quarrying is not a mainstay as it was in the past. It is now more of a subsidiary of a larger development process. It's no longer as essential to Bermuda building as it once was in years gone by. The use of synthetic products is becoming more available and viable and part of an industry standard. And while a wide range of products is increasingly available, we know that it is going to take some time for those products to perhaps be available en masse to the market. Most Bermuda houses do continue to be traditional slate, so that need is going to be there for the foreseeable future. But there are other types of products available. The Department of Planning has reported an increase in the number of applications for new synthetic materials for consideration by our Building Materials Committee. And only this week, many of you would have seen a report in the media about 2 Bermudian structural engineers and their new product, referred to as Slate 2.0, which they say can be made, 1, here on the island, and 2, from materials here on the island. And those materials can be up to 75% recycled from debris and materials that can be generated right here on the island and have been specifically designed for Bermuda roofs. So there are alternatives becoming available, and our building methods and the choice of building methods that Bermudians decide on in the future are going to have to change to respond to this clear issue of slate. Even though in emergency cases like after hurricanes, there's clearly going to be an issue of the supply of traditional slate. But as we continue with development and building as a country, we're going to have to think about, well, what are the alternatives? Because there's not always going to be the availability of slate or the number of people to cut slate as perhaps has been in the past. I expect the need and demand for synthetic options to increase going forward, And we look forward to others who may come forth with other options similar to Slate 2.0. With that, everybody, thank you for coming, and we're happy to take any questions.
Good afternoon, Minister.
Good afternoon.
Couple of things, maybe just to begin with. Do we know how many houses remain damaged from Humberto?
I don't believe we do know.
No.
No, that's not a number that we would have. Those persons don't come in to report to us
Fair enough.
at all. And if I can just add a point there, one of the things that we did after Humberto, which was to help with people to quickly facilitate development, is that we forgoed any types of fees that might be incurred with replacement sort of activity from Humberto. So if you had to replace slate on your roof, you didn't have to come to planning. So that's one reason why we wouldn't know. People were just allowed to go ahead and replace their damage as it was just replacing what had already been removed.
Sure.
So we wouldn't know. The only way we'd have known if we'd have required them to come in and sort of report their damage to us.
There was an update provided from the ministry, I want to say back in October, about the kind of wait times that people in need of slate were looking at. I believe at the time it was pegged at about 2.5 to 3 weeks was the wait time for people in need of slate. Can you give an update on what kind of wait time people are currently looking at for slate?
I will ask my able director of planning, who has been keeping a watchful eye on the situation. Perhaps she can give some indication as to what the time is right now.
Sure. Good day, everyone. The information we receive is largely anecdotal, such as what you would be receiving as well. But in speaking with the quarrying operators, which we do have a relatively regular line of communication with on a week-to-week basis, I'm hearing the same as you. I know there are a lot of people also waiting for insurance claims to come through, so that's another consideration as well.
So the wait still would be 2.5 to 3 weeks?
From what I've been made to understand.
Okay.
If I can just add, that also will also depend on the rate of cutting being done by slate cutters.
Who are private operators, I understand.
Typically,
Yep.
yeah, they're private operators, but typically they can cut 600 to 800 slate a day.
Depends on, sorry.
Yeah.
Depends.
That's on average. But as has been the case, some of the sites, even where slate was being cut initially, that cutting has depleted or has stopped for different reasons.
Yep.
One site was stopped because the quality of the rock was no longer appropriate for slate, so they had to move on from that. So that may have delayed some of the momentum that initially was in the process of supplying those in need.
Sure. Wanted to turn attention, if I could, to a specific quarrying application that had been, or that has been granted approval, the Judkin Lane site. You're familiar with it in Hamilton Parish?
Yes.
Okay. There's been a number of complaints that have come in from different NGOs about the way the application has been handled. Amongst them is that it's an extreme and massive development in a conservation area, which seems to be, in their opinion, forced through. I'm curious what you say to this.
I won't give any comment on any pending applications. As would be publicly known, that application is the subject of an appeal.
Okay, but it's not a pending application. It is
the subject of an appeal, so it's pending. It's
Okay.
pending appeal.
Okay. Can you talk at all about, my understanding is that the application for that quarry was advertised on a Wednesday and was granted 2 days later. Can you speak at all to that time?
No.
No?
And I'm not even sure that timeline is accurate. But anyway, all of the process around applications for development are a matter of public record. So anyone can go and see the whole process. The file is open to those who wish to view it at the planning department. So there's no secret as to the process around these sort of applications.
There's also been some suggestions that details in the initial advertisement were not clear, so that neighbors and other objectors, such as Audubon Society, BEST, Bermuda National Trust, would be less likely to object. Anything to say to that?
As I said, I don't have anything further to say about any specific application. That application is pending an appeal process, and so until such time, I have nothing to say at all on it.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'm going to put two more questions to you anyway,
Sure.
specifically because it's my job to do so.
Sure.
The application that was granted for quarrying there was done before a development application was granted at that same site, as I understand it. Is that not, does that not seem to be the opposite way that these things should be processed?
I'm unable to answer any questions around that because that would have been a matter for the Development Applications Board, not myself as a minister.
Has the ministry been in touch with any other property owners in the Hamilton Parish about use of existing or historic quarrying operations?
We were contacted by other owners in the area who, in light of the emerging situation that exists in the country post-Umberto, were prepared to make their sites available to the government for quarrying. They would have to have gone through a process to ensure that quarrying could start, but that process never materialized because there was a choice made that it wasn't necessary to take advantage of their offer. We were appreciative of the offer, but it was just not taken up.
Okay. You mentioned before, if I'm incorrect, please correct me, at least 4 different sites right now where potential quarrying could take place. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're awaiting final submissions from other persons who've expressed an interest in making sites available for quarrying. Those submissions will be made in the proper way. They will be expedited as efficiently as they can, all within the guidelines of the planning laws and regulations. But we await for those persons to make those submissions.
Okay.
And the department has been very efficient, in my view, with processing any applications that have been made, particularly on the Department of Planning side, for quarrying.
Sure. My final question, Minister, and I appreciate you taking so many, relates again to the Judkin Lane Quarry application. We've heard that Chris Ferbert Jr. is connected to the application for that property. Can you confirm or deny this?
I have no idea who is connected with the actual application itself. That application was considered by the Development Applications Board.
Yeah.
And until such time as it comes to the Minister for Appeal, I'll have no information on who is a part of it or whatsoever.
Understood. Thank you, Minister. I appreciate that.
Afternoon, Minister.
Good afternoon.
Are we going to see a day in the future, in the near future, where plans that come in for new buildings are going to be told that they have to go with an alternative roof structure?
Thank you for that question. We are actually looking at a number of different ways going forward where we can promote more sustainable building methods in Bermuda, and we will definitely look at making it more suitable for the inclusion of alternative products for traditional Bermuda building methods. So the answer to that is yes. That process has already started, and myself and the planning department, along with the Department of Environment, have been looking at how we can help the process of building to be more sustainable as well as more efficient. We already working on some streamlining initiatives within the Department of Planning, but also we're looking at how new alternative building methods can be used that will be more sustainable, that will not subject developers to some of the natural issues of hurricane damage or people who need to repair their homes to the usual issues that come after natural events like that. So yes, we are looking at more sustainable building methods and how they can be incorporated, and also with a view that hopefully this will even help to lower some of the costs related to development as well.
Thank you. Just wanted to know No, have the St Regis or the airport developments been affected at all by the lack of slate?
No.
Cool. And the other question was, after in 2014, after Fay and Gonzalo, there was a lack of slate. Just to clarify, what has been learnt from that is being applied now?
Well, I think what we've learned is that the issue of the availability of slate continues to be an issue, and that we must aggressively now, before the next season, help with ensuring that alternative methods like the Slate 2.0 are made available to the public. It did not exist post 2014, so we were completely reliant on the availability of natural slate. Here we are now in 2019. There is the opportunity to help bring alternative, sustainable, artificial products to the market so that by next season there wouldn't be such an exposure. Some of the challenges, I think, with some of the existing artificial products is that they don't merge well with the natural slate. So there's been a challenge with that with some developers. That's why people ultimately have deferred to using the usual existing slate. But then some people have decided, well, since the amount of damage is so extensive, they're just going to totally remove that aspect of the roof and add an artificial product there, and then it merges better. But when it comes to just little remedial repairs, the artificial products don't necessarily fit well. But with wholesale roof replacement, the artificial products obviously are being deployed, and we know of a number of cases where people were looking for slate, have decided instead of waiting for the slate, they've deferred to a artificial product, and it's worked for them. So we will look between now and the next season to making sure that while artificial products are available, that they are easily available to everybody concerned, not only for repairs, but also for further development going forward, as long as these products are reliable.
Okay. And how much slate was already cut before Hurricane Humberto?
I cannot give you information on that. As I told you, the availability of slate is purely a private sector issue. You would need to speak to those who are quarry operators to find out that is not information government would have, because it is a private sector matter, the provision of slate in the country.
Okay. We're talking about preparations for the future, although your colleague, MP Zen de Silva, he was quite direct after the 2014 and Fay and Gonzalo, saying, let it be a lesson for whether it's a PLP government or an OBA government, let it be a lesson, we should keep a large amount of slate in stock. Were there any processes put in place between then and now?
Well, you're talking about a period which was primarily under another government, so you need to put that to those who are running that group then. But I think I've answered the question about lessons learned as to what we're going to do going forward, because the storage of traditional slate is very difficult to do. So having traditional slate sitting around for 4 or 5 years waiting for a possible hurricane is not an easy system to maintain, because it is a natural product. It's subject to erosion, it's subject to weathering, and that is not an easy process. So that is why going forward, having the availability of alternative products is actually the better way to go, because even the Slate 2.0, and I'm not trying to plug them, give them a shameless plug on this podium, but as it goes from what I understand, their product can be stored easily, and it doesn't erode, it's not subject to weathering, and can be available for the next opportunity when replacement is required. So I think that the next way to go is to ensure that the alternative systems are readily available for replacement and repair, rather than just exclusively relying on the slate. Now, I can only deal with the lessons learned since 2017 to now. I cannot myself deal with whatever happened between 14 to 17. That was with another administration. If there was some way for them to respond to that situation, I'm sure they could have done so. But we know what we're going to be doing going forward, and we're going to be going in a different direction.
All right. And the reason I ask is there have been 2 complete hurricane seasons under this administration. So the reason I'm asking that is, with the MPs, then opposition MP, Sean De Silva, saying that at the time, were there any preparations made? You said yourself, Slate does not last, so whatever preparations you're going to make them at the beginning of every year or every hurricane season. So were there any plans, any developments done in the time that this government's been in?
One of the things that we're doing is now, because I think you're missing the point that there has not been a hurricane that hit us directly since 2014. So there wasn't the need, or at least the feeling that we needed to have stores and stores of Slate sitting, which likely would not have lasted for 5 years in any event, available for replacement opportunities that might arise. Now that we've had Humberto, and if I can say the predictions is that the types of hurricanes that we're going to be meeting may be stronger and more often going forward, we will begin to do some things, as I've explained. We're going to create this incentive program so that there can be more regular cutting through the year, and incentives so that developers will cut on a more regular basis. I think you also have to appreciate, sir, there are only 5 people in the island who have the means and the resources and the expertise to cut slate. This is not 1950 where there may have been 10, 20, 30 people who were slate cutters. So even with a emergency situation like we have, there's only so many people who can cut 600 to 800 slate a day. So there's always going to be a lag if we're totally reliant on the natural product. So going forward, we're doing things that is going to ensure that there's less of an emergency. We will try to incentivize slate cutting on a regular basis, with incentivizing developers to make their properties available for cutting. And we will work with those, like those 2 innovative engineers, to see that the alternative products are readily available in a supply that can assist in emergency situations like post-hurricane.
Thank you. We'll have a final question from Bermuda.
Minister, can you just remind everybody of the products that have been approved to be used other than slate at this point in time?
I'll allow the technical persons to advise on the particular products themselves.
Gosh, it's not an exhaustive list, but there's Duraslate I'm aware of. There's SKB. There's the Slate 2.0, just only recently this week. I understand a number of the building distributor companies actually bring in products from overseas and they have been over the last couple of weeks in particular, in the last month actually, bringing in their own supply of synthetic materials from overseas.
I'd just like to thank both Ms. Pereira and Dr. Smith for being here. They're the real brains of the operation around dealing with this process, so I'm glad they were here to answer any questions that need to be answered. But we will continue to monitor the situation on behalf of the Bermuda public so that we can report accurately what is happening, and we are doing our best in the Department of Planning and Environment to facilitate the process so that the supply can ultimately be available for those who need it, because I know that people are hurting and need slate. So we're doing our best to make sure slate will be available and those needs will be satisfied. Thank you.